All right. So welcome, everyone. I'm Alex Tarantino. I'm the Education Committee Chair. I want to thank you all for being here tonight for our last presentation of the day. So this is going to be a presentation by the New Sweden Center. So we actually have the first bit recorded. So I'll go ahead and play that. Just a few housekeeping items. We'll do questions after the video. So as they come up, you can feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to submit questions for us to, or for our speakers to answer at the end. And with that, I want to introduce Dr. Abdullah Muhammad, who is going to moderate this session today. He is one of our board members. So welcome, Abdullah. Thanks so much for being here. You can take it away.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. So I want to say good afternoon and welcome to everyone for attending this last of today's webinar presentation. As it's already been mentioned, I'm Dr. Abdullah Muhammad, and I will be your moderator for this presentation. I want to take the time to thank all of our sponsors who have helped to make this conference possible and also to make it free for everyone. And as Alex has already mentioned, we will take all the questions at the end of the presentation. So you have already been alerted to the fact that you're muted, so you will put your questions in the Q&A button using the Q&A button. The chat function is available as well, so you can get in touch with us in case you have some kind of technical difficulties. And because the presentation is recorded, it will be available in a few weeks on our Preservation Delaware's YouTube channel. And if you are not already a member of PDI, I really encourage you to consider joining or at least donating. Your support just really helps to keep events like this one free and keep them coming. And we'll post more info in the chat as we go through this particular presentation. So let me give you a brief introduction of our participants for this presentation. The first is our starring video entitled Who Wore What When, which is a video of an unusual fashion show designed to feature the changing clothing attire over 400 years of history. Another key participant is Aleasa Hogate, who is the Vice President and Education Chair for the New Sweden Center Board. Aleasa's Swedish heritage dates to the first ship of Swedish settlers to arrive in this country. She's been an integral part of the New Sweden Center since the mid-1980s. In fact, today's video presentation is a product of Aleasa's persistent drive to educate the public about Swedish history and culture. Next, we have Janet Anderson, who has been president of New Sweden Center for so long she is New Sweden Center royalty. In fact, she's been part of New Sweden Center about as long as Mrs. Hogate. Janet, whose family also dates to the early Swedes arriving to this country, has played a significant role in the production of this fashion show, as well as being a key player in the completion of this videotape. Another key participant is Deb Hofmann, who has been with New Sweden Center since the late 1990s, and she was somewhat kidnapped from her crew duties with Nickel ship and her attachment to their foundation. Her long career as a teacher and docent lent themselves graciously to our desire to teach and demonstrate Swedish history and culture to Delawareans, as well as visitors to Delaware. We've been greatly blessed with her knowledge of Swedish history and how best to present that history to the public. As I introduce our next presenter, Ruth Runkle, you may have noticed that there is no speaker bio for her. This was no oversight, but the result of a last-minute addition to assist with some logistics of making this presentation. Ruth has been a fixture with New Sweden Center for over 30 years as well, and was also an active member of the Nickel ship crew, and their foundation. Her long career as a teacher and docent has been a great addition to our ability to spread Swedish history and culture throughout the Delaware Valley. And incidentally, both Aleasa and Ruth are both from living in New Jersey. It is important to note that all of these young ladies and yours truly all played a significant role in the production of the video you are about to see. So with that, I'll turn it back to Alex to begin our video of who, wore, what, when, and I really hope you will enjoy it. Back to you, Alex.
Thanks so much. I'm just getting it queued up here. I appreciate your patience. So hopefully you all can see that. You can see my screen, right?
Yep, let it roll.
All right, great. And here we go.
We begin our Who, Wore, What, When fashion show with models representing the first Americans, the Algonquins, who called what we now call the Delaware Valley Lenape-Hocking, land of the Lenape. Many Eastern tribes considered them the original people. The Swedes found them to be peaceful. These woodland peoples, later known as the Delawares, were subdivided into 3 separate but overlapping cultural groups, living in what is now Delaware, eastern Pennsylvania, and South Jersey. Their homes were wigwams. In wintertime, families shared more substantial longhouses. Both our male and female models are wearing fringed buckskin. Our young brave's outfit has bear claws adorning his leggings. Native warriors and spiritual leaders sought to emulate the spirit, strength, and courage they had observed in bears. The volunteer wearing buckskin with beaded roses represents the Oklahoma Pawnee, who would eventually become neighbors to many Lenape tribal members in the 1800s, when a great number of them were forced to move to a new western homeland. The function of the fringe on these deerskin provided movement that helped repel insects and wicked away the rainwater and perspiration, keeping the wearer drier. Our model in purple is wearing a style of dress known as the longhouse dress, worn at clan events circa 1900. The bright colors were adopted when decorative elements could be purchased from Europeans. This outfit was designed by the Iroquois, centered in what is now upstate New York. The Iroquois would eventually unite other tribes, including the Lenape, for negotiation of land and peace agreements. The last volunteer is dressed as a Mi'kmaq lady who lived in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, Canada. Like all fashion, uses of color and ornamentation change with the times, even among those who continue to uphold the traditions of native peoples. The first European explorers who visited North America were ancestors of what would become much of Sweden and Scandinavia. Although they did not visit the Atlantic coast as far as the Delaware Valley, they did encounter Native Americans when they came ashore. The Vikings were a warrior society that traveled vast distances in sleek, open vessels that could be sailed as well as rowed. Berka, Sweden, was one of the Viking capitals. There continue to be new discoveries made about their settlements. Recent findings have shown that even some Viking women were also warriors. Our female Viking models have homespun undergarments with an apron dress adorned with jewelry and replica tortoise brooches, known as fibula. They were fastened on both sides of the apron. Strung between them were beautiful glass beads made by the Vikings. Wearing an abundance of beads was an indication of a woman's social status. Our male Viking warrior is protected by chain mail, a metal fabric made up of thousands of interlocking iron rings. This mail was always made with a 4-in-1 pattern, each ring passing through its 4 adjacent rings. Most often it was styled in the form of a male shirt, as the one being worn by a member of the Leif Erikson Viking Ship Society. In 1609, Henry Hudson, sailing in the half moon, seeking the Northwest Passage, discovered the Delaware Bay. Captain Samuel Argyle, an Englishman, named it Delaware after Thomas West, Lord Delaware, governor of Jamestown in Virginia. In 1621, The Dutch West India Company was chartered for trading and colonizing in America and established a trading post, Fort Nassau, near the site of Gloucester, New Jersey. Our two Barbizon models represent the first Dutch colonists. Our little Dutch boy, wearing knee breeches, is carrying 2 canvas water buckets on a wooden yoke and is wearing real wooden shoes. Children had the responsibility of hauling water from the creek and other tasks. Our little Dutch girl is dressed in clothing not unlike those worn by their parents, since children of the 17th century wore basically miniatures of the clothing worn by adults. She is carrying a piece of Dutch pottery and an arm full of tulips. Zwannendale, Dutch for Swan Valley, was a trading post erected in 1631. It was located near what today is Lewis, Delaware. However, the next year, a misunderstanding occurred between the Dutch and the Indians over a tin painted coat of arms that had been taken by one of the Indians. When the Dutch asked them to punish the thief, he was executed. In retaliation, all of the settlers were massacred. Sweden was a great power in the 17th century. It included Finland, part of Norway, Russia, Poland, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, and Germany. King Gustavus Adolphus was killed in the 30-Year War, leaving no sons. His daughter Christina, age 6, and the kingdom were under the care of Axel Oxenstierna. New Sweden Company was chartered in 1637 to finance an expedition to set up a colony and trading post in the New World. Peter Minuit, former governor of New Amsterdam, headed up the expedition. He is wearing a stylized woolen suit with capped shoulders, typical of men and women's clothing of the period. After a 4-month voyage from Gothenburg, Sweden, the Dutch sailors and Swedish sailors in 2 Dutch-built ships, the Kalmar Nyckel and the Vogel Grip, arrived at a natural rock landing in March of 1638. Peter Minuit set up the Royal Crest, claimed the land for Sweden, negotiated for land from the natives, and began building a fort. The river was renamed in honor of Christina, the then 12-year-old future Queen Christina. This rock landing is now part of Fort Christina National Park on 7th Street in Wilmington, Delaware. Minuit died on his return trip to Sweden in a hurricane while a guest on another ship. The Swedish ships were safe in harbor and sailed back to Sweden to bring settlers to the colony. In 1639, the Vogel Grip brought the 25th man to the fort. When picking up supplies in St. Kitts, the captain bought a slave from Angola known as Anthony Swart, Black Anthony. He, like most settlers, wore a simple linen shirt, drawstring knickers, and a slouched felt hat. Since Sweden did not engage in slavery, Anthony was a free man, but became an indentured servant to work off the debt of his sea journey. Little is known about him other than he worked in the fields and later served on Governor Prince's yacht. Spring of 1640, the Kalmar Nyckel made her second journey to New Sweden Colony, bringing Peter Hollander Ritter, the new acting governor, and settlers to New Sweden Colony. His colonial outfit was originally worn by Malcolm Mackenzie, the founder of our New Sweden Center. Some came with their families for free land. Many came as indentured servants to work off a debt or in exchange for free passage to the New World. The descendants of these early pioneers are an important part of the legacy of New Sweden Colony and continue to contribute to the development of our multicultural country. Our volunteer model, Jesse Hogate, is a 13th generation descendant of Anders Larsen Dalbo, who came as an indentured servant and worked at a tobacco plantation in Fort Korsholm along the Schuylkill River. Jesse is the grandson of Aleasa Hogate, New Sweden Center's volunteer education director. Our models represent the various walks of life of the settlers, who were farmers, fishermen, tradesmen, and blacksmiths in typical period clothing. Swedish women were industrious. Although the company store had fabric for sale, the women spun their own wool and flax, wove their own fabric, and hand-sewed their families' clothing. Widows were destined to extreme poverty, since unlike today, there was no government support. The model is wearing a traditional Finnish folk costume. Finland was not a separate country in the 17th century. 2018 honors the 100th anniversary of Finland as an individual country. The Finns were mainly woodsmen. With them came a special construction method of building log cabins to the New World. In 1641, Ritter purchased land from the Indians between the Schuylkill and the falls of the Delaware, and land on the east of Delaware from Raccoon Creek to Cape May, and on the west side from Bombay Hook to Cape Henlopen. Johan Anderson Stalkop, whose surname means steel coat, is wearing a replica of an ordinary steel coat of armor. During the 17th century, surnames were not used in Sweden. If you were Johan and your father's name was Anders, you would have been called Johan Andersson, son of Anders. A female named Elizabeth would be Anders' daughter, daughter of Anders. Surnames were chosen and adopted when they came to the New World based on a person's trade, appearance, or what they wore. Many Swedish names still retain the double S. If your name has a double S, you may have Swedish roots. Tinman Stidman was the barber surgeon on the Kalmar Nickel and became the first medical doctor in America. Doctors then were also barbers. He is wearing his formal attire, but also wears a leather apron to protect his clothing if he is called into service. The silver pomander held sweet-smelling spices to mask the smell of disease and infected flesh.
Governor Johan Prince was a military man of great stature, over 6 feet tall and weighing over 400 pounds. The Lenape referred to him as Big Belly. He fought for King Gustav Adolphus in Poland during the 30 Years' War. He arrived in the colony in 1643 with special instructions to keep the peace and evangelize the natives. He built Fort Elfsborg on the east side of the Delaware and Fort New Gothenburg and his manor house, Princehof, on Tinicum Island, where he relocated the seat of government. The Swedish Colonial Society and Essington Township in Pennsylvania are currently recreating a log cabin farmstead at Governor Prince Park on the very same historic grounds where he once lived.
Sven Skut from Kronoby in Finland supervised construction of Fort Elfsborg. Governor Prince later ordered that Sven Skut return to Sweden with letters to plead for assistance for the colony. In March 1651, he secured an audience with Queen Christina, reporting that more settlers and supplies were needed. Only 70 men remained in the New Sweden. Queen Christina issues instructions to Sven Skut to find 250 new settlers for the colony. The Eagle arrived in May 1654 with about 250 passengers and Johan Rising, the new governor. Skut was then promoted to captain. Food shortages still plagued the colony. Some colonists moved to the Sassafras River in Maryland. The Dutch built Fort Casimir at Sandy Hook, Newcastle. Prince's forces were depleted by death and desertion to Maryland. He abandoned Fort Elfsborg and Fort Horsham. When 22 freemen filed a petition complaining of his autocratic rule, he considered it mutiny, killed one of the soldiers by a firing squad, packed up, and returned to Sweden, leaving the colony under the command of his son-in-law, Johan Papagoya.
Governor Peter Stuyvesant, known as Peg Leg Pete of New Netherlands, appeared in the Delaware with 7 armed ships and 317 soldiers on August 30th, 1655. The outnumbered Swedish forces recognized that fighting was useless. Their 50 soldiers were divided between 2 forts, so Captain Sven Skut surrendered Fort Trinity on September 1st, 1655, and Governor Rising surrendered Fort Christina just 2 weeks later. Most of the Swedes and Finns decided to stay in America by pledging their allegiance to the Dutch.
On August 31st, 1655, when the Dutch were attacking New Sweden colony, Delaware's first militia was headed up by Captain Sven Skut. The Swedes were no match for the Dutch force. This was the first time a citizen militia was called on to perform military service, and the beginning of the Delaware National Guard, which has served admirably in every major conflict our nation has faced for over 3 centuries. The Dutch granted the Swedes and Finns self-government as long as they agreed not to take arms against them. When Governor Stuyvesant asked the Swedish nation to supply soldiers in his war against the Indians of Ossipus, Kingston, New York, the Swedes refused. They maintained their historic non-aggression policy with the Indians. The Dutch lost the colony to England in 1665. Sweden brought Lutheran worship to the colony. John Companius was a priest associated with many firsts. John consecrated the first Lutheran church built in the New World in 1646, a log building on Tinicum Island, south of what is now Philadelphia. He translated Luther's Shorter Catechism into the Lenape tongue, not printed until 1696. During 1644 and 1645, John recorded observations of the local weather twice a day, becoming the first man known to have kept such observations in North America. 3 ministers arrived in the Delaware Valley. Andreas Rudman became the pastor at Wicaco, now Philadelphia. Ericus Bjork served Crane Hook, south of the Christina River. Jonas Aaron started a new church at Northeast Maryland, St. Anne's, to serve Cecil County. Reverend Aaron also ministered to the Indians at Conestoga. In 1699, the congregation of Crane Hook Church built Holy Trinity Church at Christina, present Wilmington, to replace the log church at Crane Hook. This church is still in use and is part of Delaware's National Park. The Lucia tradition can be traced back to Saint Lucia, a 4th century virgin martyr. Our model, the granddaughter of Donna Draper, is wearing a crown of candles, a white gown, and red sash worn annually in the December 13th Lucia celebration at Holy Trinity Church. The first English census was taken in 1671. Finns and Swedes moved to the east side of the Delaware River and settled in what later became known as Finn's Point in Penn's Neck, Salem County. Swedes joined them and settled further upstream. This required them to travel by boat for business and religious services. They built their own church at Church Landing Road and Raccoon, now Swedesboro, New Jersey. In 1681, William Penn was granted the new proprietary colony. He required the Swedes and Finns to be naturalized as English subjects and obtain new deeds for their farmland. He employed Swedes and Finns to negotiate treaties with the Indians. Some Swedes and Finns sold their riverside land that became Philadelphia to Penn in exchange for twice as much land in present Upper Marion Township, Montgomery County. Others moved to West Jersey. When 33 ships arrived with hundreds of Quakers, the Swedes and Finns were outnumbered by the English. This model is wearing the type of dress an upper-class Swedish woman might have worn when visiting the estate of William Penn. After nearly 100 years of English control, the Swedish and Finnish finally assimilated into the English culture, but objected to the heavy taxation and supported separation from England. Our revolutionary model in uniform represents the Swedes and Finns who helped win our independence in 1776. Our model of John Morton, a Finnish Swede, is wearing garments cut like those following the general vogue of the day, typical of Quaker influence, black and lacking ornamentation. It wasn't until the 19th century that shoes were made with a right foot and a left foot. John was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. Swedish relationships with the new nation, the United States of America, have created an ongoing friendship to this day, encouraging cultural and political exchange.
Being fiercely anti-slavery and freedom-loving, most Scandinavians enlisted in Union regiments during the Civil War, in the firm belief that all men were equal. During the war, Lieutenant General Grant had a home in Burlington, New Jersey, where his children were in school. On April 21, 1865, just 2 weeks after the surrender of the Army of Northern Virginia, President Lincoln invited the Grants to attend a play at Ford Theater. The Grants declined the invitation, pleading the necessity of making school arrangements. While waiting for the ferry that was to take them across the Delaware, Grant received the dispatch informing him of the president's assassination and requesting his immediate return. A special train was ordered, and he returned to Washington through Wilmington, Delaware.
The Swedes contributed in many ways during the Civil War. John Ericsson, a Swede, invented the Monitor, an ironclad ship with a rotating turret housing 2 cannons that served the Union. In battle with the Merrimack, a Confederate ironclad ship, a tactical stalemate strategically saved the remaining Union fleet from defeat. Fashion in the 1830s was influenced by Queen Victoria of England. The local women tailored their dress to elaborate fashions. The bustle and blouses with leg of mutton sleeves were popular. Our model represents Edith Ferris Bringhurst, the 3rd daughter of Edward Bringhurst Jr., who acquired Rockwood from Joseph Shipley. In 1897, Edith was married at Rockwood Manor. The historic property was donated to Newcastle County in the mid-1970s. Our next model represents women suffragettes. The 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, known as women's suffrage, granted American women the right to vote and was ratified on August 18, 1920, ending almost a century of protest. However, 14 years earlier, Finland became the world's first nation to grant full female suffrage in 1906. The first female member of parliament in world history was elected in Finland in 1907. Wearing an authentic World War I, 1917 to 1919 doughboy outfit, our model represents Swedish descendant Glover Cleveland Urian. The outfit belonged to New Sweden Center's treasurer Joan Parsons. With the end of the war began the era of the Roaring Twenties. Women were emancipated and began to flaunt it. People indulged in new styles of dress. Our last model represents a typical flapper, young, liberated, and scandalous. She rejected old ways, bobbed her hair, and wore short skirts. As she waves goodbye, remember to study the past, preserve it for the future.
Fantastic. That was awesome. Thank you so much. Let me see. I'm looking and I don't see Abdullah. Give us 1 second. Tim, are you with us?
Yes.
I think Abdullah is on the attendee list. Would you be able to promote him back to panelist?
It might take 1 moment, but I
Okay.
can do that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, yeah, that was, I mean, that was really fascinating. I mean, I'm sure it was a major undertaking to organize all of that. So I mean, I guess I'll start by saying I think we'll have Abdullah back in a, oh, here he comes.
I apologize. Somehow I accidentally turned off my computer. And when I tried to join back, it wouldn't let me come in as a panelist. It only let me come in as a participant. So anyway, here we are. I hope all of you enjoyed that really entertaining and very, very informative video. I tell you, I'm actually seeing a finished product for the first time myself, and it's way a lot better, much better than what we have finished with earlier last year to present. So, Alex, do we have any questions for panelists, because they are eager to speak to the audience in reference to what had to be undertaken to complete this video, which was, I should say, it's a labor of love, and was also one that we're just so happy to complete.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I'll welcome our attendees to add some questions in the Q&A, but we do have a couple. So I guess, can you describe for us a little more about the idea behind the fashion show and kind of who came up with it? And just a little bit more about, yeah, the idea behind it and maybe the process, the organization going into it.
Well, I'm gonna ask Aleasa to speak first to that question, because it was pretty much her brainchild, I believe. And I sort of misspoke and put her down as education chair, but she's director of education. So I just wanted to make that correction. Aleasa, I just want to say, while she's getting set up here, that the video went through a number of revisions. I mean, a number of revisions. And I'm sure that all of them would like to take a long time to really go through that, but we're sort of the time is our master, and so we have to abide by it. Aleasa, you all set up now? Can you speak?
Yes, I don't know. I'm not techno.
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
All right, I will answer this and say that it just came to my mind because my concept of this whole story is the people. And without the people, they didn't bring the people over here in a ship and drop them off and let them drown. We are still alive. The ancestors are carrying the story of our heritage, and it was not being told. And I just thought it was a cool idea to come up with clothing, and the wording, who wore what and when, was formed by our past Joan Parson came up with that idea, the words.
Oh, great, great. Deb, would you like to add to that?
Sure. I'm sorry, we had a little distraction. What happened was, I think we hashed it around for quite a while in the board and came up with this idea that Aleasa put forth of following the trend of fashion, which is kind of a different point of view, going from settlement or original people all the way to the present. We couldn't go all the way to the present, but we went up to the 20th century. And it was quite a lot of fun to be able to, and a lot of work to be able to find the costumes, make some costumes, borrow some costumes, beg some costumes, and then to have the people who would model them for us. So it was an enormous effort that Aleasa put forth through lots and lots of her contacts. She really worked the very center, the very core of this event. It came out of her very creative mind, and she worked really hard to make it happen. The making of the video, the narration, the editing, took an enormous amount of time and perseverance. And she stuck with it until we got what you saw today.
Good, good, thank you. Can we have the next question, Alex?
Sure. So let's see, thinking about the times you mentioned, it went to the present. So one of the questions was asking what went into the decision behind ending with the 1920s?
Okay, I believe that was something that Donna had come up with, wasn't it? Or who came up with that?
I think actually it was, we sort of ran out of ideas and possibilities, and so we said, okay, we've got enough and we can go with that, because the actual show took over an hour and we edited it down to what you saw today. And if we did any more, then just keep going on and on forever, so.
Yeah, we had to find some endpoint, and World War II just seemed like that was a good endpoint. And whose son was it that modeled the World War II outfit? I know it was one of the board members.
World War I.
I mean, World War I, I'm sorry.
I'm not sure who the model was to remember his name,
It
but
was Joan Parsons'
it was
ancestor.
John Parsons' son,
And-
okay.
ancestor, and she offered that costume for us. And so therefore we thought that was a good way to end it. And we did it on November, was it November? Oh,
Yeah, November 2017.
right.
It's November 11th,
November
2017.
11th, which was Veterans.
Veterans Day.
So that's what put the culmination there with Veterans Day. And it was
Alex, can we have the next question?
Another question?
Sure thing, yeah. So can you tell us a little bit more about the costumes? We have a couple of questions about the costumes. I would say first, maybe asking about sort of the research that went into
years.
making the costume. Okay, and then also can you
Years.
tell us about the materials and methods, if they were used, or if you used historic materials and methods. So yeah, any details about the costumes, I think we'd all be really interested to hear.
Alex, I hope you're going to add another 15 minutes, because that's what it's going to take to have that answer for you, because that was the largest labor-intensive part of putting on this program.
The
Aleasa,
research.
let you start it off.
Do you want me to start?
Yes.
Yeah, I know it's kind of difficult,
All right.
but
First of
right.
all, I wanted to belong to the group of the New Sweden, the Kalmar Nickel. I wanted to be a reenactor. And so therefore I researched everywhere. And there was a lot of conflicting information. So I ended up going to Sweden and seeing things and researching on the internet and in libraries to find out what kind of clothing they actually wore. That's what took so much time. And I don't know if you noticed, but on all of the clothing, they had a cap sleeve. That was sort of unique of that time period. And so that's why I used that. And then the women, for instance, I found out that the Swedes did not have stripes in their clothing. The Finns did. So there's a lot of, I can't tell you, except lots of research needs to be done even yet.
Good. Anyone want to add to that with the time we have remaining?
Some of the costumes were donated. Aleasa was able to get some of the more recent, that is to say, costumes of the 19th century from Rockwood Museum, I believe you said. Aleasa borrowed a couple of those, and
Yep.
There are reenactors everywhere who have their own costumes that they have researched, and so we were able to be in touch with those people who, and many were willing to be part of this event because it spans, 400 years, and it sort of tracks something they are interested in. Reenactors are always interested in the fashion of their period.
And let me add one thing. The New Sweden Center is supplying the clothing that we had in this in this exhibit and this show to the farmstead that is at Tinicum Island. And we have the log cabins. You saw that just briefly. And in fact, I came from a meeting this morning, and we are now at the Lazaretto building, and we are putting forth an effort, a joint effort with the Swedish Colonial Society to complete and promote this heritage at the site where Governor Prince had his established home and fort, which they've never actually explored much.
And I just want to add another word, that it was a yeoman's feat to coordinate the models that needed to wear these clothing. I mean, negotiating and working with Barbizon Modeling. In fact, they donated the what was it? The vast portion of the feet. Yeah. So it took a lot of sacrifice on a lot of people's part to really pull this off. And I'm telling you, it didn't happen overnight. I can assure you, it was a long and to say it was a labor of love is sort of to really minimize, but it was a labor. Let me put it to you that way.
And there's more that we can do.
Absolutely.
We
Another
need,
question?
any more questions?
So, well, it sounded like maybe, do you have future plans to for this video, or just does the center have future plans that you want to highlight?
Well, first of all, if anybody who's attending wants to see it again, they can go to colonialnewsweden.org, which is our website, and the video right now is right on the first page, and you can watch it again and again and again.
Not only that, you can download it and use it in your classroom, or with your ladies group, or with your men's group, or with your preservation group.
To say, do we have plans? We don't have plans, but we would really like to see, like, in a second edition or a spin-off or a continuation of this fashion to go from World War I on up.
And I was asked if we would do it again. The only way I would do it again is if I had a very large grant.
Any other questions, Ally? I see we're past the 6 o'clock magic hour, but.
Let's see. I think we covered them. There is a comment in here from Rebecca Wilson just saying wonderful job, and that she really enjoyed the video. So I just wanted to share that with you all and make sure that you heard it.
Thank you, thank you.
Well, I want to thank you for having us to present this. I want to thank Janet Anderson, Deb Hofmann, and Aleasa Hogate for being here to present this to you all. And hopefully we'll get another opportunity to be a part of it. And I just want to just let you know that we have a very aging board. So we are looking for new members to New Sweden, and hopefully to become active members. So just get in touch at our website. Janet, can you give that again? I
posted the link in the comments.
Oh, okay. It's in the comments? In the chat?
Be part of this.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Very good.
let me close with saying, we need reenactors, because the reenactors convey, and people love talking to people in costumes. And you can be one of three kinds. You can be a pretty face with an outfit on and not say a word, just walk around and look pretty. Or you can be one that knows a little bit and can pretend they're a cook or a jeweler or a whatever. And then you can be one like myself. You're speaking to Mrs. Anders Larson Delbo, who came over on the ship. So you have a choice. Are we
Okay.
We done?
Turn it back to you, Alex.
Yeah, just thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure meeting you and hearing from you and learning about your experiences with this. It's really fascinating. So we'll just close it out for today. We have a full day of events starting again tomorrow. So I hope you all can join us. I believe we start at 8:30 tomorrow. And then I want to remind you all, if you aren't already registered, after our virtual conference events, which end at 3:45, starting at 5, we have an in-person gathering planned at the Cooch Diet Mills in Newark. So HCA is going to be giving tours of the mills. I think there are some spots still left. So if you're interested in that, I welcome you all to go to our website and register on Eventbrite to attend this event and hopefully get on one of the tours. I think it'll be a really fun opportunity to see the site, but also to mingle and to see some folks in person. I know it's been a while for me, so I'm looking forward to it. And with that, thank you all for attending so much. And thank you to our speakers, our sponsors, and I hope you all have a good night. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.